All right. All right. All right. All right. So happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Clear channel, KLEAR channel, going up on YouTube here shortly. Listen, if you haven't subscribed, this is my helpless plug. We started the channel 3 years ago, and now we are over 1,400 organic subscribers across not only our organization, but outside of our organization. And we have a killer speaker today, a very good friend of mine, Eric Chapman. We've known each other for years in business. He's going to tell us a little bit about his life and his career choices and kind of how things have turned out and share some wisdom. But my mission, Eric, as I'm sure you've heard, is to help change the world one leader at a time. And I know in our business that we're in, obviously we're doing that every day by helping people not only get jobs, but also make a difference in their habits and their life skills. So first of all, Eric, good morning. How are you? Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm excited to be here. This is a great honor. Thanks for having me on, Ken.
Appreciate it. And no worries. And I know you're doing some traveling, hanging with the family a little bit today and this weekend as you're working a little bit remotely. But do you mind telling us about life and family and where you're from, so people who watch the channel or maybe are jumping on today, they can get to know you a little?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually at my folks' place right now at the beach, Fenwick Island, Delaware, if you know where that is. It's near Ocean City, if anyone's ever been to Secrets or anything like that. Yeah, I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland. Maryland is split by the Chesapeake Bay right in the middle, in kind of the metropolitan area. DC, Baltimore's on one side. And although it's a small state, I grew up in like a completely different country, like farms and a lot of waterfront. And it was lovely. And my folks, obviously, I think took pretty good care of me. My dad was a teacher, and then later went into finance. And then my mom started her own business in the fashion industry. She started a sewing machine dealership, fabric store, and went on to buy her own space and bought commercial property. And so that was kind of neat, being able to grow up and watch them pursue what I would consider like sales and entrepreneurial endeavors, right? And seeing the wins and the losses from all that was probably really healthy for me from a business perspective. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Just
I didn't know that she was in that industry. I don't know if you know this. My mom is, I mean, for me growing up as a kid, that she would always do a lot of our sewing. She would make some of our clothes. She did. I mean, she didn't create a business out of it, but she did that a lot for my
Oh
brother
man,
and I.
we better not get our mothers together because they will go crazy. Yeah,
Right.
my mom is upstairs. There's a whole room dedicated to sewing. So yeah, it's a
That's
big deal
awesome.
around here.
That's awesome. So you grew up in Maryland in the East Coast, and then you go to school in that area, from what I remember, right?
Yeah, out in Western Maryland, out in the Appalachian Mountains, small little school called Frostburg, and met my wife there, Tara, and that got me a little bit going on a straighter and narrower path, and moved back home after college and thought about, pursuing education, and maybe coaching basketball. I played high school and college basketball, and um, you know, had some good advice from, I think, my dad, was to start out being a substitute teacher. And I'm like, oh, I love to teach. This will be great. I mean, I knew within day one I am not meant to be the teacher, So I
What
love to
turned you off about
teach.
it? What I mean, what was it?
It took me a long time to figure out what it was, because I love kids and I love to teach, but it's what I would call a static career. My wife's a teacher. I have a great respect for teachers. You start as a teacher, and then that's your job,
Hmm.
and your passion comes from helping your kids grow. If you find that, which my wife has, but we've all had bad teachers that maybe didn't find that, and I think I thrive more in a dynamic career where you don't you're going to make out of it. What you're doing today isn't going to be what you're going to be doing tomorrow, and you have opportunities but also challenges, and that's maybe more aligned for sales and business, and the competing that comes in that industry. So I couldn't figure out why I didn't like it for the longest time. But once I realized I needed to be a more dynamic industry, that
Hmm.
the ending wasn't written out. It's going to be what you made it. That's, I think, what led me to move back to Washington, D.C. and maybe start pursuing a career in business.
It's interesting. I never heard somebody kind of position it that way. It makes total sense, right? So your point in teaching and some other industries, it's a linear path, right? It's what you're doing now is what you're going to do in 20, 25 years. And to your point, people find value in different ways of doing those careers. But in maybe an industry like ours, like, both of us started in sales, and then over time we got into a leadership role, and then a leadership role, and then a management position. And then obviously, things have changed from there. And speaking of that, do you mind sharing us a little bit about, so how did you fall into, what did you study in college, by the way?
Marketing, business administration and marketing. But, when I moved
Okay.
home to Easton, Maryland, there's not a lot of opportunities. It's a small town. So, I didn't think I would actually pursue it as a career, to be honest. I thought I would move back home and, do one of, several things, but teaching was probably top of the list.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you moved back there, and then tell me about the next 5 years of life. How did you fall into, the industry that we're in? What was that like? Where were you? Who did your interview? I mean, tell me about all that.
Yeah,
Obviously,
sure.
I know these things, but just for
Yeah, the
anyone who's
growing
watching.
sense that, I needed, as we spoke about, a dynamic career to feel happy. Playing sports made me realize something. I think I figured it out. I was speaking to one of my college professors and talking about, my career choices. And I kind of came to the realization that I would rather be in the game and lose than not in the game, right? I hate to lose, but I'd rather be playing. And the great thing about sports is the outcome's uncertain. It's certainly challenging, and everyone that's played sports knows that you have good games and bad games, and there's also the potential for embarrassment, right, in front of a crowd. And if you play long enough, that will certainly happen. So I'd rather have the worst things happen, but be in the game and I hate losing, but I'd rather that than not be playing, right? And
Hmm.
so my professor suggested sales to me, at this stage. And I'd been out of school for a little bit. I just called him to talk to him. And I was surprised by that. I never really thought about it as a being industry. I did some retail sales and I did some crazy beach jobs, but when I was in
Oh yeah,
college,
we'll talk about that in a minute. I remember that.
right. But I really thought like, well, look, in sales, there's a ranking, right? If you're the top producer, any customer acquisition, everybody knows it, right? And that's kind of like sports. If you're the best player, everybody knows it, right? I always say, if the coach disagrees with Michael Jordan's job's not at risk, right? Right. So you have some level of control in a performance-based industry where, you can leverage your performance into being able to get the things that you need to succeed, right? And so I kind of crave that level of control, and I think that's what made me gravitate to sales. I wasn't very good at it when I first started, which was a bit of a shock. I really thought I'd be a natural, but I wasn't. But there was the control and the dynamic element of it, and the fact that I could dream about my future again and what it might become. I think those are what gravitated me out of my comfort zone, which is a small town, and back to Washington, D.C., and pursuing kind of a more of a career that was challenging and dynamic.
So you mentioned that your first go at sales. Do you mind telling everybody who watches the channel about the beach and what you did on the beach?
Oh yeah, well, one of the things I'm most proud of in life is that I mostly paid my way through college, without hardly any student debt. And there's this crazy job. If anybody's from Maryland or Delaware or Virginia, you'll know about.
Or been to a beach?
Yeah, I guess it's everywhere now, right? But there's these crazy sales guys that sell photographic keychains of you at the beach, right? And this was back when there was like traditional film, and they're called scopes, a little picture that you can look through and look up to the light, and you see your family or your friends or whatever,
Hmm.
and you can buy them for about a buck. I think they resold them for $3 a piece or something like that, and then you would run up and down the beach all day and try to sell, photographs and get people to pose and whatever. It's the craziest job in the world. But man, is it fun. And if you get good at it, you could make about $20,000 a summer, which, back then was a tremendous amount of money. And of course, no one's good at that right away. You have to become a photographer. You have to get really good with people. You have to create a fun environment. You got to get people to want to come to the studio and buy them. but once you figure all that out, it really is a great experience. And so I learned maybe the first part of sales, which is how to get someone to like you and have fun. But later in the professional world, I realized that's not all that sales is, right? So there's a little bit more to it, down funnel, if you will. But that
Yeah.
was a fun experience. And I think the thing it taught me the most, the craziest thing about the job is it was 7 days a week. And a normal day was like 12 hours, maybe sometimes even 14 hours, right? And occasionally we had off because it would rain or something like that. But the only people that survived that crazy job are ones that just knew how to work really hard and have fun doing it. And that experience, I think, really served me later on in our
Sure.
career and everything. So it turned out to
That's
be a
awesome.
fun job, but it turned out to be a really beneficial job as well.
It's awesome. I've always found that things that are, you don't really know sometimes the things you're going through and how it serves you 5, 10 years later, right? It's almost like now where you are, and as you build a huge business, you look back and you're like, man, although that pain I went through, and I'm sure you were tired a lot, and I'm sure that obviously the sun and sunburnt and all these things that were wanting you, to just sleep in. You look back and now obviously that served you
The
so
hardest
much.
thing is when everybody all your roommates are going to secrets. And if you go, you're going to be exhausted the next day. So
And hungover.
all right. So that was the hardest part of saying no. More time. I didn't always say no, but saying no to that.
Yeah.
So,
So you fall into our industry. When did you start in the industry that we're in?
I started in the field in 2003, and then I progressed and I started my own firm in Philadelphia in 2004.
So, and I know you and I came across each other. So for anyone that watches, it's kind of our cool connection we have. So I was a brand new business owner, right? I was just getting promoted to ownership back in 2003. And I went down to DC because we were picking up AT&T as a client, and your location when you were a leader in the field, right?
Yeah, brand
You
new.
you
Well, not brand new, but pretty brand new. So,
So a couple months as a leader
yeah.
and top performer. And that location was training my team that I was expanding with to Columbus, Ohio. So I was going to be the next new owner. You were a trainer. We went out in the field together a couple times. You were teaching me the field. And I can't say this for sure, but I've heard that I helped you with some of the interviewing side of things back in the day.
First
So it
off,
was like it was a match made in heaven.
we crushed it in the field.
We
So,
did. We did.
right. So, by this point, I had gotten past some of the things I was doing wrong, and I had kind of figured out a rhythm. And then, I think when you get two people that are certainly motivated and like sales, it really kind of we had a really great couple of days. But what I took away from it was, Ken, you were really, one of the premier trainers, and you had a big vision for your business, and you were backing. I could see in your actions on how how we treat the customers, how hard you work. And I thought I was working hard. You were working a little harder than me, and I hadn't met anyone yet that had worked harder than me. And then how you train and how you talk to a new person. And it kind of, I can't remember anything specifically, but it was kind of those three things: your vision, how you worked with new people, how you treated the customers, how hard you worked. And I remember thinking, like, that guy's going to do big things, and I can do that. I can do what he's doing, and I'm close now, but I needed to step up my game a little bit. And that was
Mhm.
probably a pivotal moment. There's a couple, like you said, if you look back, you can think of, like, hey, there was a few things that happened that, maybe I was fortunate enough to experience. To our credit, we don't miss them. A lot of people have them and they miss them. But
Yeah.
that moment was, those 3, 4 days, that was kind of a pivotal moment. And I became a top team leader, top trainer right after that visit.
Right.
And yeah, it was pretty cool.
It's awesome. Yeah. And I remember our buddy Georgie was there. He was a young rep in the field, right? And
Yeah.
obviously it's interesting how our careers have evolved, and George has built such a big business too.
Yeah. It's
So
kind of
so
cool.
tell me about entrepreneurship. So obviously you learn our business about a year and a half or so from when I take, and then you become an entrepreneur. You're a young guy. How old were you when you started your first business?
Oh, I think it was 28.
So 28. So you
Yeah.
weren't, fresh out of college. You had other experiences.
Right.
You start in our industry. So I know you obviously had this, compared this to other things, right? You had experiences of what you didn't want to do, and you fell into this a little bit later.
Yeah.
Maybe not that far later, but not like your first job out of college.
Right. That's right.
So you become an entrepreneur at 28 years old. Tell me about your first year of ownership, your first year being your own boss. How did it go for you?
Whew. Okay. So there was two things, I think that really tested me. And one was figuring out how to pay for tuition and all my expenses and get through college, right? And the second thing was my first year of running an office. And I think what happened, why it was so challenging, because I had developed the skills. I knew how to sell to customers. I knew how to run the logistics part of the business. And, I wasn't skill deficient. I was confident deficient. And I think it took a little while for my confidence to catch up. I'm running an office and I'm like, okay, I've achieved a big goal of mine. I hadn't formulated the next goal. I was kind of in shock that I had achieved it. I'm like, okay, I'm a business owner. I'm running a business. Well, I think the people that were working for me saw a lack of vision. What they really saw was, we don't want to go out of business, so everybody work hard, right? Well, that's an uninspiring message. And it probably made me my worst version of a coaching self, right? So all those limiting beliefs were coming from lack of self-confidence. It made me into coaching poorly and inspiring very little, right? So everything felt hard for about 6 months. Now, maybe to my benefit, maybe a little bit to my credit, I think the one skill, and then I would suggest anyone can have this skill, I'm good at attracting top coaches. And the way you attract top coaches is you ask questions, you find them, you ask questions, and you go do it, right? And then they're like, okay, because usually they tell you things that you kind of don't want to do. Like there are things that are out of your comfort zone, or you got to develop a level of discipline that's a little higher. So but if you do it, they recognize, okay, my advice is, gonna get utilized here, right? So all of a sudden you start law of attraction, you start attracting top coaches, right? And I got to work with some of the very best. John Wiggins was a huge mentor in my life at that stage. And he had really high expectations for anyone around him. I wiggled my way into getting in his circle, and it wasn't easy because I was so feeling unconfident, and he was giving me real direct coaching, pushing me out of my comfort zone. So it was one of the times where emotionally it was really difficult, and I was scared to fail. But I did what I think sometimes people struggle to do, is I went to the top people, and instead of kind of running away and hiding, right? And I really wanted to run away and hide, right? And what that did is, of course, you level up. You can't be around people that are significantly more successful than you without leveling up. Everyone knows the saying, if you 5 people you surround yourself by are generally who you assimilate to. I was getting, the top people in the business around me and our industry. So after about 6 months, I remember it started to click a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is kind of working. And my confidence hadn't caught up yet, but I was doing all the right things, and what I learned from that is courage comes before confidence. If you wait for confidence, you're never going to get anything done. You have to, the courage came from me going to the top people and exposing my inability to be successful at that time, but saying, coach me, I'll do whatever you need to do, right? And that took all my guts to muster that up. But I did it, and then I did what they told me to do, and it wasn't that actually hard. In hindsight, I was more of my fear that was making it hard. Emotionally, it was incredibly challenging, but the actual work wasn't that hard, right? And then you start scoring wins, and then your relationship with yourself changed. What happens next is you start to feel really proud of yourself. You're like, you know what? I didn't want to do that, but I did it. And now it's working. And I'm earning this success. It's not being given to me. And then what came year 2 for me was a growing sense of self-confidence. Not pride, because I'd been humbled so much, but some inner self-confidence that, you know what? If I set a goal, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hit it, right? And so that affects how you coach other people, because you have the confidence in yourself, right? And so when I say something, it's going to get done. And then I started attracting really talented people. And that started, I became a promoting owner. I started expanding my business year 2. And then year 3, it all came together. and started having really great years. And that put me on a path to be running an organization. So,
Right. Yeah, you put it in such an awesome way, in my opinion, the courage, right? And I think sometimes people think when they meet people that are already past that phase of courage and they have the confidence that that they just got it, that they just that's just something they have. They're just a really confident person. But what I've realized, and I know you have too, is we all go through things.
mm-hmm.
And most of the things that when people see us as we succeed, that we've already been through years and months of getting our ass kicked and getting humbled and eating humble pie, right? I talk about that a lot, and when I coach people, like, listen, somebody's getting humbled right now, and I'm like, dude, this is so good for you, and they're like, I hate it. No, this is really good. Like, I'm excited for you because I'm excited to see who you are. I'm excited to see how you respond, how you change. Like, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Right. So like, I'm really, I get excited, but to your point, to get to that confidence, you have to go through some things at times.
Yeah.
And so tell me, so when you think of the maybe the doubt, right? The trying to build up that courage, what are some things that maybe you've said to yourself, or do you have any personal mantras now that you've grown in your career? Is there anything that you would share maybe to your younger self as you're going through that time of just building your courage and building to get to the point where you're really confident? Because I see great people that just they're kind of a roller coaster in doubt, right?
Yeah.
And listen, we were all there, right? So we've kind of gotten to the other side in a way. But anything that you would say to your younger self as far as, to get the courage and build that, remove that self-doubt?
Right. Well, every entrepreneur or business owner I've ever met has either failed multiple times or failed a few times, or at least was convinced they were going to fail at one point or another. I've never met anyone that had some linear path that they started, they crushed it, and it's kept on going. Maybe it exists, but even if you research the greatest entrepreneurs, right? Like, they all at some point, it looked bleak, right? So Steve Jobs, Musk, all those are the most successful companies. They still went through that process, right? So I think when at one point I was convinced my business had failed, and I didn't think there was anything I could do to change it. So then the only decision was, how do I go out, right? And then I kind of thought about it like, well, I know the answer to this. I know there's sometimes you look up at the scoreboard and you're like, there's no chance left of winning, but I want to walk off this court with my head held high. So I'm going to play my heart out, right? And then what you find a lot is a 20-point deficit isn't unsurmountable. There's actually a lot more time on the clock than you might think, right? And so kind of the greatest gift for me was when I thought, like, I don't think I can save this. All my fear eroded, right? There was like no fear left. I'm like, let's just play all out and see what happens, right? And then immediately things started turning around. And like, I remember the night, it was like 2 a.m. when I kind of came to that conclusion. And I'm like, do I write my resume? No, we play all out until it's played out. The game is over. Well, 2 weeks later, I was in a very different spot, right? I'd kind of like, you know what? I think this isn't going to go south. I think we are going to win, actually. And it was amazing how when fear left and I just did what I knew needed to be done, that was the only thing that changed. Everything started to come together, right? So what did I learn from that? Okay, well, that I know how I respond in the worst case scenario, right? And so a tremendous confidence came out of that experience that I would have never had if I would have done well right out of the gate. I don't know if I would ever learn that about myself. So
Sure.
So I felt I've never really had that anxiety since. There's definitely times where I didn't like the way something was going and it was making me, upset, but I've never felt that deep sense of fear. And so I needed that experience to be able to succeed. It's what armed me to be able to have the other side of the coin, which is to achieve any kind of success, right? So I think in that moment, I think you said this earlier, you do anything to get out of it, right? you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy, but it's kind of a necessary ingredient, right? And so I think as I've gotten older and I look at challenge, there's a business I'm trying to build right now, and it's definitely difficult, but I have no fear, no anxiety. I come in every day and I executed a plan and attack, and and so that's, I think, the maturation that you learn for going through that process.
Yeah, it's it's one of those times where, again, looking back, you realize that things aren't happening to you; they're happening for you. You're really, as life throws things at you and you're challenged and everything else, it's like, hey, like if you can shift, and it's hard, so hard to shift the mentality, but if you can shift the mentality of what am I learning through this time, as opposed to just woe's me,
Right.
you tend to get more out of it. So tell me about this. I know you and I've talked a lot about family, and your parents are, a huge positive influence on you,
Yeah.
which is incredible. And I'm really happy you're spending this time with them today and this weekend. Do you mind sharing, sometimes when people start in sales, they start in commission-based positions or performance-based businesses, that sometimes, not everyone understands or necessarily agrees with the choices.
Right.
We've all gone through that stage. How did, as you started moving into your career and advancing, is there any conversations, anything that were they, supportive? Were they not supportive?
Yeah. Well,
how did that go?
I you know what I said on my interview, Ken? I've rarely heard this in all the years. But I said I was looking for commission because I wanted to prove a company my value, right? And the look I got on the interviewer's face was like, is this what's going on
okay?
Here? Right.
Am I getting punked?
And I thought maybe it was a bad answer because of the face they made. And then I know that you just don't hear that very often. I think as humans, we crave security, but I was raised from, my dad, who was a school teacher that went on to finance, which is hugely performance based, to my mom that took the risk to start her own business. I don't think she paid herself for years, but built a business that was able to, not only provide for the family, but subsidize a great retirement and property ownership and what have you, right? So I watched my parents, and then that was dynamic. Okay. So like there was ups and downs for sure. But I never felt it was insecure, right? Because I think everything's insecure. Okay. And it's just who has the control. So my wife, who's a wonderful teacher, right? And she's built very different than me. She is, and of course, I think teaching is one of the more admirable professions you can have, right? To raise our children's, intellect, and the youth need amazing teachers, right? So she had great admiration for her, and also because I wouldn't be very good at it, as I know. And she would not be very happy in an environment that I crave, right? That it feels a little bit to her, it's chaos. To me, it's not, but that's how she feels, right? So what I took from my parents' experience, right, and I watched all that growing up, and then my dad was a teacher, my mom was stay at home when I was really young. Well, we didn't have a lot, and then they went and started building their businesses, and they achieved success and started owning multiple homes, and and that was really an amazing experience to watch, right? And so when I embarked on my career, I had no fear of commission. And by the way, the selling the keychain thing was a commission thing, and I was able to pay my way through college selling keychains. So so I really had no anxiety about that. My parents didn't have any, they were very supportive about it. I've since learned that not everyone's parents are like mine. And I got to get this great advantage in life because that, commission isn't risky or unrisky, and salary isn't risky or unrisky. The world is risky, and it's just about where you want the control, right? And I need that control on me. If something isn't going to go right and I have control over it, it's my fault, or something does go right and I earned it, it wasn't bestowed on me, right? Then that's how I'm built. I feel better that way. So that was a great advantage.
And it's interesting because obviously my side of things was a little different, right? My parents being engineers and architects. My mom, I'll never forget the time I called her as I was driving home from the office my first couple of weeks, and I was telling her about the job. And my parents used to do this, and as they were in Florida, they used to do this. We'd get on the phone at the same time. And then mom would be like, honey, what did he say? I can't hear what he's saying. Honey, get off the phone and come hang out with me on the other line. And then they'd be in the one same speakerphone and they'd not hear.
Right.
But I remember my mom's like, you have no car, because I drove my grandmother's car like an hour one way. You have no apartment, because I lived in my grandmother's like retirement community condo. And she's like, and then you have no salary? You are crazy, honey. I don't even know. How are you going to eat?
Right.
And that's just what I grew up with, right? So very, very different.
Yeah.
So tell me, and I know we have too much time left, and I know you're spending time with your family, and I appreciate, thank you for doing this while you are there. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of people will obviously appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here.
Tell me about the business you're building now. What are you doing now? Obviously, you've been in our industry for a bit. You've worked with clients like Verizon and like some really massive brands you've built partnerships with.
Yeah.
What's the project you're doing right now? And I may not even, I think I know.
Yeah, I think you do know, but I'll explain in my own words. I part of my goals early on was to do what I thought some other people had done before me, which is once they got to a certain level of success, try to improve the business. So, we came from humble beginnings, right? We started out with promotions, worked our way into Fortune 500 clients in the B2B space. And then there were bold people that worked into consumer and then built out the retail space. And the business has steadily improved, and it's made it better for all of us. It's better. The better the business is for the newest people, the reps in the field, the better the business is for everybody, right? The more profitable, but also the better, right? And I don't think the business should necessarily get easier, but it can definitely get better, right? And one of the ways to do that, because as I said, my dad was in finance, and I considered that path a lot, is, many people in finance do sales for decades and decades, maybe even a lifetime. And the reason that's a very rewarding career is, I would say, twofold. One, financially, you can do incredibly well, right? But two, and I think the second one is maybe a bigger piece of it, is a lot of the sales are from cultivating long-term relationships, right? So maybe when you're a young advisor coming up, you may be prospecting and you may meet someone like yourself, Ken, and sign up a small financial service like a Roth IRA, maybe, right? But as your success grows, two things happen. Your financial success grows, and that benefits the financial advisor, but probably also there's referrals, and then later your kids and extended family come on board, and so the client list grows, and then the advisor role goes from a salesperson that sold you a small financial product, an IRA, to an advisor. They work for you, and their job is to help you hit your financial goals for a lifetime. And it's very rewarding. I watched my dad go to appointments and work with his friends and help them get their kids through college and retire on time and things like that. And so I've always, since very early on, saw that our business had that level of potential. The barrier at the time was that the way our contracts work with our clients, that we could represent one client to a customer at a time, right? And after COVID, we renegotiated some of those contracts, and many of the companies were very open.
The reps don't even know this.
Yeah, they're extremely open to us, not just representing them. And because they are long-term thinkers, and they know that they could get more customers in the long run if we can represent more clients, right? I would say, like, imagine a Best Buy that only sold Samsungs, and then imagine a Best Buy that sells all these other services. Well, you probably sell more Samsungs too, because you're getting more traffic for the store, right? So that opportunity has started to open up. Not all of our clients, but many of our clients are very open to that. So we started building out a new brand called Connect Me Better. And the idea behind Connect Me Better is our reps start off, just like I've mentioned with the financial industry, is they start off as a sales rep, just like we do now. And they establish a relationship and a good service to a customer. In my office, we do UMA, which is this great voice over IP service provider. But once that a successful transaction has occurred, we have great trust, right? And anybody that you ever circle back to a customer, go back to an old territory, pop in, they're like, hey, how you doing? There's an immediate trust because everything that you said came true, and you built a relationship, right? And then, but in the past, we've given that trust. Now is we built that for our client, and then we leave. But now we own the customer, and we have an opportunity to present them other ideas that maybe would benefit their business from an advisory role, right? So we can represent maybe more the customer and the client, not just the client to the customer. And of course, then all the data starts getting collected. So now data is not a new thing. Google owns all your data and Facebook, all these, everybody, the data has been out there, but Google doesn't have a relationship with the customer, right? And we do. So as the data compiles and as our reps build a bigger book of business and more customers have said yes, it's going to present us really unique opportunities to build an even better business, keeping all the same principles and the same things that make us great. Now, none of those are going to go away. It'll still take the 8 great work habits to succeed, but we can open up a cultivation, not just a prospecting. We can be hunters and farmers, and that's rewarding, working with long-term customers that you have relationships with, and you're running into them at the Wegmans, on the weekend, and you ask them about the kids, and I think it's going to present the same business model. I don't think it's going to change. I don't think the core values, I don't think anything's going to change other than the fact that we're just going to work with our customers longer term, right? And that's probably a really, really positive advance in our company.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Eric, again, I know you're with the family this weekend. I really appreciate you jumping on the channel. Any last words of wisdom? And thank you so much for your time today. This has been awesome.
Yeah. For the young people out there, courage comes before confidence. So don't worry if you don't feel like you have it all down. Don't worry if you don't know where you're going to be yet, when you're 40. Okay. But, find courage.
Or when you're 27 like us.
Yeah, right. I got the filters going right here if I'm fooling anyone.
Yeah, right.
So thanks for having me on, Ken. It's been an absolute pleasure, man.
My pleasure. All right, guys. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on the Clear channel. Please subscribe. Thank you so much. Have a good day, guys.